Hello, everybody. It's Holger Müller here from Constellation Research, welcoming my friend, curmudgeon Freund. I always speak German here. Jon Read, welcome to the show, John.
Hey, Holger, I think we're going to have a couple of fresh debates today because I'm not so sure we agree on all this stuff. It's going to be fun.
That's what we always try to make it
I
interesting. I
know.
figured out, why can I see your full face? Do you don't have your Twitter or X handle up there anymore? So this is why you have more room for showing your microphone, right? Shameless product placement here.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't even get an endorsement out of it.
Yeah.
Too bad.
Yeah, and
Maybe
we
I
want to
should
talk
work on
about
that.
state of AI. No, we want to talk about the race for the Champions League. No, the NBA playoffs. Is that something you could talk about here? No.
Yeah, but I don't think the viewers are tuning in for that. So, but
Three
yeah,
random topics from you to throw out.
yeah, man. Random topics. Let's see.
Yeah.
How much information Holger can fit on a slide is unbelievable. Let's see. Holger shifting from red shoes to a combo package, and let's see. The event travel tarmac adventures roll on, and that's why we're here.
The rollout, exactly, yeah. So I guess all of that is not interesting, so I have to think about the tarmac adventures. Hopefully there's not too many coming up. But we were in beautiful Napa Valley last week at Workdays. We don't even know what's called, right? It was the Innovation Summit.
Yeah, we'll
It was
call it the
Analyst
Innovation Summit this year. Yeah,
It was
yeah.
the AI and Innovation and ML Summit. So it was the Innovation Summit this year, right? So it's like changing every year. So the good thing is the hashtag is the same, right? So for those who are still on X, all my notes are on X, right? Look at W Day Summit. My Twitter handle is below here. Plenty of my notes are available there. Yeah.
So yeah, and you've got your one slide for those who want to check that out. I think I wanted to say to start off with that this is an analyst event, and typically analyst events used to be laden with a lot of NDA slides, but Workday more and more has opened things up, which allows you and me to debate freely. One thing I'll reveal that was not under NDA is that Holger was a troublemaker at this show and raised some really provocative questions, and we're going to get into some of that today. And I also just so what's that?
Me, troublemaker, never.
Oh yeah. You definitely stepped it up. You did good. And then also, I wanted to just briefly mention that the lead up to the show was super interesting because Workday in February made some pretty provocative announcements. First of all, they talked about launching their system of record for agents, and they're not the only vendor by any means to start looking at how we can manage this multi-agent orchestration so that customers can effectively scale agents in the future. So they're not hardly the only vendor there, but they're pretty provocative around the digital worker theme and how Workday is going to essentially be the employer of record in a sense for all these agents, and if their vision comes true, that places Workday and HR in particular in the center of everything, which is of course what they want to be. But that provoked a lot of debates on whether AI agents are actually human workers, and if so, is this an IT purview or an HR purview? So I think what I'm trying to say is that the show kind of was set up to kind of prime the pump over all of this stuff. And I think that's one reason why it was such a feisty and interesting show to be at.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely a land grab, I would say. I see AI agents and software like a machine. We long times found software is soft, right? And the hardware is the machine, which you put into your inventory and your scheduled maintenance and so on. But agents, which ultimately will go to robots, right? In the real world, they will equally be in the inventory master and the plant maintenance master of a company. So I see it more as Workday being clever. One for, okay, if you could license every agent for a seat, that would be nice. I don't think that's going to work out in the long run. But on the other side, you need, as an ERP vendor, you need an administration of the agents which are there. Why not call it the agent system of record and get some fantasy going, and at least the HR analyst community where there's a system of record going. So, but I need the administrative streams for that anyway, so I can know John has these agents working for him and Holger has these agents working for him. So why not make a lot of marketing out of it while I might be, and we get to this busy with other stuff, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, and it also sets up a really fascinating tension, which we can get into between that sort of notion of agents empowering humans versus agents kind of competing with humans with employee status, and that can actually make AI, I think, feel a little scarier to the average worker. So there was a lot of interesting debate around that, including Workday's own customers chiming in on that. So I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But I thought we should maybe start, Holger, if you're up for it, with just kind of sharing a few things that we learned at the show, and then maybe that'll spill over into the contested issues and the debates. What did you learn, Holger? Because you're pretty well versed on Workday. So was there anything that jumped out to you?
Yeah. So the thing is, of course, the leadership change, right? I mean, to start with the elephant in the room, or the new thing in the room, right? So who would have thought that Workday, who used to make fun in slides, even at a reInvent about a certain fellow German competitor of them as being the Frankenstein piece, that two executives from SAP who largely built their teeth there, right, with Rob Enslin and Gerrit Katzmeier now being there to pretty much righten the ship, accelerate the ship, save the ship, whatever you want to use as an analogy. So that's almost like we would say 5 years ago, that would be an April Fool's message. That would be happening, but it's very real now. So
and I would add to that they were kind of thrown to the wolves, the two guys like right up on stage there at the beginning. And to me, I think what's really interesting about that is that Workday really aspires to be a global company now, and they don't want to be pegged as a North American company. And there's not much better way to really do that than to pull in a couple of guys that are really familiar with the vagaries of things like the German Works Council and European mega regulation and stuff like that. And I've known both Rob and Gerrit, and if you were going to hire a couple of ex-SAP guys, those or gals, if you will, or however we should present that, those are two that I would be pretty high on my list. So I think they're underestimated. That they weren't they didn't really seek the limelight, but they were smart, and they always sought out new ideas. So that's going to be really interesting to see what they have to do there.
Yeah, and as someone who is not born in this country but living in this country, similar to them, the outside of the country experience and growing up somewhere else is what brings the value to build a truly global, localized system, right? And not to be unfair to anybody who grew up in North America and is building great software here, but it's harder to imagine and realize and appreciate the cultural, the legal, the language difference which are happening outside of the North American continent, right? We don't care for the Canadians. They have the same country access code, right? So they're all the same except for some pesky people living in Quebec, but that's a different problem to sort out later.
Well,
so I think that's what helps. Yep.
And add to that leadership contrast, you have Carl Eskenbach, CEO, in his second year at this event, where I thought he felt a lot more, I think, comfortable, naturally so. It's his second year, but also kind of that balance with Anil Busri, who's obviously a towering figure, not just in Workday, but in enterprise software, still playing a role, but Busri being much more focused on strategy, technology, AI, and reading between the lines, I think, looking to make sure that Workday stays relevant, and Busri went so far as to say that AI he views as a more significant enterprise technology than cloud itself. And I think that's a pretty big statement from him, because the multi-tenant cloud is the very reason that he's enjoyed the type of success with Workday becoming a Fortune 500 company that he has, because that was his big vow after PeopleSoft, which was we need to rethink how we do software. So for him to say that AI is bigger than cloud, it's not some radical statement, but I do think it carries some additional weight.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. But he's been saying that AI is the most transformational thing since 3-4 summits, right? There's no question about it. In his keynote, he talked a lot about Anthropic. He mentioned the founder, Dario, lots of times. So he definitely did some learning, interviews, validation there. No surprise. Workday used a lot of Anthropic out of that. But I have some
salty comments about Anthropic coming up, but let's hold those for now.
Okay, let's steal your thunder,
but it was It was significant, though, because that type of close partnership, I think, is very interesting, because I don't think the mega AI vendors like Anthropic really understand enterprise technology and scale and security intimately well the way Workday does. And at the same time, Workday doesn't have access to the same kind of what they call next gen or edge models or whatever you want to call them that Anthropic does. So it's an interesting dialogue.
Yeah, and like the general rule of thumb for us, right? If a CEO talks about technology and quotes another CEO of a technology provider 3 times by name during his keynote, that means there's significantly thinking coming from that vendor slash supplier. So that's the interesting part there. But yeah, I found it's interesting also that the organization's a little different, meaning for product developer, Cheyenne Chakraborty, who ran products before, reported to Anil. And Gary Katzmeier is going to work or report to Carl. So different setup, Carl more in charge, Carl more comfortable, Carl picking his team, how to get Workday into the right direction or in a better direction, right? Which has to be more growth, always more profitable, as the question is. And like you said, more global, no question about that. Yeah.
So obviously AI was like the big theme, and they Workday went over and reviewed a number of the agent announcements, and we can get in a little bit to that. But they have a number of AI agents that they're either releasing or by the end of year. But I think, Holger, there were also some somewhat underrated announcements that were not so AI related that you kind of noted on your slide. Include the so-called one slide, which is jammed up with content. I think the success of Venly, I think, is really interesting. Kind of blurring the lines between the contract and the full-time workforce is something that's needed to happen across HR tech for a long time. I think some of the payroll moves is really important for in a global sense, and then Workday Extend, I think, and you could argue that Workday might be moving a bit slow with Extend to AI, and we can get into that in a moment. But the overall success of Extend is pretty impressive, given that I used to give Workday a hard time for really lacking an extensibility platform, and they've kind of taken that criticism away from me. I mean, some of the stats around Extend are pretty eye-watering in terms of the level of adoption that they have. Yeah,
great point, and it's pretty much really the validation of their X-free strategy, right? Workday is building stuff, but it's no longer just Workday. It's partners building stuff, and it's customers building stuff, and that's all powered by Extend, which has a long history by itself, being the Workday Cloud Platform and now Extend. And we have the Workday Developer Conference coming up in a few weeks, so there's going to be more news on that, which we can't talk about, but super crucial, is substantial for every enterprise application vendor, because as I say all the time, we live in the area of business best practice uncertainty. So nobody really knows how companies will be running their systems in a few years from now. So this is why it's so crucial to have a platform which allows customers and or partners to extend. And Workday was very clear, right? Workday is no longer saying we're going to build it all, right? So that sales ship has sailed. It's coming for the whole industry. And it's good to see of Workday enabling partners and customers to own their automation destiny, which includes AI, because everybody is building the AI capabilities on top of their low-code, no-code. I call them the enterprise application platforms, the PaaS of the SaaS vendor, right, which allows customers to extend, integrate, and of course build new applications. And now it's of course new applications built by AI.
Yeah, I was looking for those eye-watering Extend stats, and I'll find them in my notes. But yeah, and I think a big part of that with AI, and this gets into some of our debates we'll get into shortly. But how fast can you get customers and partners involved in that, and yet maintain that level of responsibility and quality control that I think is probably more important for AI than just about any other area.
Yeah, no, absolutely right, and leads to the point I asked. Maybe that was one of the troublemaker things you think. I asked
yes,
Robert Garrett, what is the number one thing they need to stop or fix or whatever, and they all talked about speed, right? And we can talk later how there was a couple of cultural things to be solved on the speed argument, but I think that assessment is completely fair. Workday, if I rank the HCM vendors, I can't talk about finance much, is really slow at doing stuff, comparatively saying. Once they've done it, they're doing it right. They also can fail with things like the big data thing never really came to fruition. The skills thing, they tried 2 or 3 times until they got it right. So I give them high praises for getting it right and not giving up, because skills is essential for an HCM vendor. And they moved the whole industry with that. Everybody was watching them. Everybody has a skill story now. But being able to build faster is really, really critical.
Yeah, I thought yours. Oh yeah, okay. So I have some of those eye-watering Extend apps. I don't know if this is the most recent stat, but 2,000
Go for
plus
it.
apps in production from 1,000 plus customers and 30 certified partners. So that gives you some idea of the scope. But on the AI side, it's still very new. And in fact, that's going to be covered by a new offering called Extend Pro. But yeah, do you want to get into the debate topics? I think we've covered a lot of the learnings.
Yeah.
Shall we get into the debates? Because I think the
Let's
speed
go to
topic,
that.
the speed topic's really, really important because like I think you were the one to really, really press that issue with them. So maybe you should start by saying, why do you think speed is such an issue here, and why were you grilling Workday on that?
Yeah, great and fair point, right? I mean, I didn't grill, right? I mean, it's my outside thing that I'm saying, what is taking them so long? It's so hard to understand that. But it was really my open question to Garrett and Rob, what do they need to do better? And keep in mind, right, I look at it mostly from the product side. Rob probably means that also from a go-to-market and sales side, that Workday needs to be faster to grow closer to Oracle and SAP as an overall business company. But on the technology side, it's just they're just the relative speed. They're building things slower than other people. They're fair and granted, right? It's always polished, it's always finished, it's always validated with customers. But in this time, like we said, business process best practice uncertainty, I need to react faster, right? I can hide behind my enterprise application platform. In case of Workday, it's Extend, and tell the customer, hey, we're not there yet. Build it yourself. Try, run around with scissors, build something beautiful, or cut yourself. It's your responsibility. And I wait till everybody's building the same thing, and then I build standard software again, because we effectively are on the end of the era of standard software. But it's things in, and they have to catch up because they followed. It was a big debate with me between Cheyenne at the 2 years ago Innovation Summit, right? They were doing AI in the old way, the before cloud way, because of their Workday cloud, which they have where their customers are running on instance. By the way, very important stat I track, right? 2 years ago, it was 200, then it was 900, now it's 1,600 customers in the public cloud, out of roughly 3,500 to 3,900 unique customers on Workday side. And that's so important because the cloud only gives you the elasticity to run things, right? One major update from Shane Luke was in the side conversation is that everything is running in the public cloud, right? The original approach quickly to update everybody was, we take data from customers, we don't take your data, we neutralize your data, then we take it to the public cloud, we build models on that, and we take them back. And I call this the hope and pray approach that you totally had to do 16, 17 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago. You shouldn't be doing it now, because customers now should say, please, please, please take my data, make this model give me the best fit a model can give. Don't give it to anybody else, my data, of course. I mean, that's goes with no saying, right? But that's kind of like given in the maturity of the cloud AI models that there is a separation like with every cloud data. I mean, forget about AI. If you could get to my data anyway, transactionally, that would be a disaster for any provider, SaaS provider in the cloud, for any platform provider anyway. So I think we all live that our data is shared in the public cloud, right, and to the multi-tenant cloud setup.
Right. And so just to be clear, and this is also from your one slide, you are making the argument that Workday needs to undergo some architectural changes to optimize and get what it wants to do done with AI. You're making that case. So
correct. And yeah, they hired Garrett Katzmeier, who run data and AI. It's Google. Yeah. So middle one with no endorsement here, right? When Google is significantly ahead of the rest of the competition when it comes to putting custom silicon on custom hardware, right? Which is the TPUs on top of right now then the Trillium architecture, right?
So let me challenge you a little bit on the speed argument, and then I'm going to also agree with you a little bit. So here's a few points to think about on speed. First of all, I'm going to make the argument that a lot of these large big AI vendors like OpenAI and Anthropic have done more harm than good by placing speed in front of things like quality and accuracy and things like that. And I've written about that enough. I don't need to get into that in today's show. So I think a deliberate approach that emphasizes quality, and by the way, I'm going to write about Workday's AI architecture on Diginomica because we can't get into all of the nuances of that in this show, but their deliberate approach around that, I think, is important. It's also important to recognize that Workday is operating AI at some scale already. Just to give you an example, Shane Luke, who runs AI for Workday, amongst other things, says 9,097 models as of yesterday in production. In the last 90 days, just shy of 6 billion inference requests out of the platform. So it's not like they are just getting started with AI. So I think it's important to point that out as well. And in addition, I think it's important to recognize that customers are in a different place. I mean, we had some customers that we were talking with on site, which was great. And even the
great customers, by the way.
They were, and they had some really good stories, including a really good Extend story from the PGA, where they had built a really cool custom payments app. But anyway, those customers are not anywhere near the type of agentic AI sort of future that you're describing of massive amounts of agents and stuff like that. So in that regard, I'm not so sure this is going to cost Workday, but there's also some big things in support of your argument around speed too. One of which is that they answered your question and they said they want to get faster. so they themselves acknowledge that one of the reasons Garrett is doing what he's doing is because of that. And it will be interesting to see if they can duplicate a little bit what they did with Extend originally, which was it took them a really long time to get Extend out. But once they did that, they accelerated quickly. And it will be interesting to see if they can do that with Extend Pro, because I'm more interested in what customers and partners are going to build necessarily than what Workday is going to build, though obviously Workday has to create more too. But I'm really going to judge this based on the overall sort of ecosystem play. And so, I think the jury's out a little bit on how fast they need to go to succeed. But hey, they acknowledge that you had a point. So perhaps, there's something to it.
Yeah. I can be wrong. So first of all, you're absolutely right. You can build AI in the old approach. The question is, can you build the good AI that customers need and are competitive today? This is where I have my serious doubts, right? The best way in the Stone Age was the best way in the Stone Age. But once we had cement, we could do other things. Or
but I'll point out to you that SAP that you cited as a positive example of this has a different set of challenges because most of its customers are on older releases, and Workday has everyone on the most recent release of their software, and Workday argues that that's a big data advantage from a customer perspective, and the success of these models relies a lot on customer data, and Workday's making the argument that they have a big leg up on vendors like SAP, Oracle, and Infor. They have a lot of customers on legacy data structures with overly customized data models. So now the interesting thing about that argument is it hasn't been settled yet.
Did I mention SAP? I don't remember that.
I thought you did say that SAP was excelling around the development of AI.
Google is.
Oh, okay. I thought you said SAP.
Google. I meant Google, right? So Google is 3-4 years ahead.
Holger retracts. Holger, if Holger said SAP, he retracts it. Okay.
SAP is no way 3-4 years ahead of everybody else, right? Because
no. But I thought you were implying they were arguably ahead of Workday on this front. So now you have a chance to clarify
they're like
that.
Inching ahead because they announced the business data cloud, right? There is no infinite storage capability, a data cloud, lake house, whatever you want to call it, on the Workday side.
Okay. All right.
But that's an inch, right? That's like they can do this announcement at their developer conference or at Rising, right? Then we're going to see again who's building faster,
right?
With half a year difference maybe between the announcements and then reality. We'll see.
So I'm going to argue that Workday is ahead in some ways because of the fact that they have all their customers on a standardized data structure. But one of the potent topics that I think is worthy of some debate and discussion is how crucial is a data lake that manages a lot of external data as well to your AI strategy. And to your point, most of the vendors in this space have talked about their data lake architectures and how that's going to complement AI, and we didn't hear much about that from Workday this year. I'm going to make the strong prediction, and I don't even think it's a very good prediction, that's going to change next year. But we did not hear that.
Year. I think.
Yeah, exactly.
My money is on this year.
Oh, for sure, right? Probably by Rising, actually, in the fall.
At least on the announcement level, And then you're absolutely right. With the power of one, right, which you didn't hear this time, right, which Workday correctly toots on, whatever the right pronunciation there is, on being on one release is very, very powerful. But say like Infor, if I would have to transform like 4 different schemas of my customers in the data lake, that is work. There's no question about it, but that dwarfs by the ability to bring third-party data in relatively to the data lake, right? So the benefit of being on a single system is there, but it's nothing compared to not having a data lake, right? So that's what, in my view, brings things in perspective.
But see, that's what's really interesting about AI, though, because I think that some of the while I do really think that external data is really, really important to AI, especially for decision making, the real time data that powers AI is also important, because as soon as something goes into a data lake, it starts to potentially date itself depending on where it's coming from and how quickly it's being refreshed. And so I think the winning AI strategy is going to require some a significant amount of real time data infusion as well, which I think is where Workday's strength is going to be from its own internal customer data repositories and its own transactions. But to your point, it's going to require more than that, and so that's really interesting, because it's hard to wrap your head around this, because there's so many aspects, because that's AI for decision making, but then there's also AI from a transaction capability, and that's going to be interesting as far as agent to agent architecture and who's going to own that, because Workday is implying that they want to throw their hat in the ring there, and that involves a lot of non-traditional Workday competitors, including folks like ServiceNow and even Boomi or what have you. And Workday started to do that, right? They have an agent-to-agent protocol they're working on with Microsoft 365. Salesforce is gonna happen in the fall, they say, or later this year. And then they're also participating in a couple of notable open standards that we're going to need to be watching, including MCP, which is an Anthropic agent-to-agent protocol standard, and also what is it? Google's got one too. It's called ADA. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
like that.
Yeah. So
there's also a lot of partners at the Google Cloud Next. Yeah. So
right.
The battle is on the agent-to-agent standard. But the interesting
that's another really important thing, and I don't know. It's going to be interesting because Workday wants to sort of be the trusted version of that, and it will be interesting to see. I mean, what do you think about all of that? How are they going to factor into that?
Good, great point, great aspect. And the interesting thing for me is for Workday to really pull this off means that the agents they expose to other agents from other companies need to be in the public cloud, right? You cannot go to the Workday private cloud to run those agents, because who knows how much these agents will be utilized, and God forbid I can't close my books or I can't run payroll in my local instance, right? So it's super interesting. So it gives an indication how important it is to run AI in the public cloud, especially when it comes to agent part. And from them announcing this, they're all smart people there, right? They thought this through. So the agent system of record might be the first data core structure of the HR core capability of Workday to run the public cloud. But I assume they will accelerate the whole thing. They find a faster way. Technically, they can run in the public cloud. It's customers holding them back, is what they're saying. But it's also them not creating the benefits of running in the public cloud, right? And AI, we see that across the industry, is moving customers who don't want to upgrade, not to mention the company we mentioned already before with 3 letters, right? And A in the middle, to upgrade account, at least based on the last current quarter numbers, right? So AI needs the cloud. It's very simple. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's interesting for Workday, because I'm not so sure that it makes sense to consider agents as employees or whatever, digital workers. I'm not so sure about that, but I do agree that their ambitions around agent governance and multi-agent orchestration, which is sort of at the heart of that, are the important thing. And I think that's something that is well worth for them pursuing. Even if they don't dominate the space, they still need to provide customers with that ability, because I think we're going to shift user experience complaints with users, because I think they're going to go from the traditional frustration of navigating software screens to the frustration of asking an agent to complete a task and finding out that they don't have the appropriate license to complete that task, and they don't have the data access to complete that task. And that was always the case, Holger. It's not like this suddenly happened, but I think agents are really going to expose the lack of interoperability between enterprise software, and it's going to be fascinating to see how that gets resolved.
Absolutely. I mean, this is why I think the inter-agent operation is going to be out for quite a while. I will see inter-enterprise agents working really well where it's already established, right? Let's talk about the exotics of the automotive industry. No car on the planet gets produced without an EDI format with a funny French name of Odette, right? That's happening already, right? So you have an order, here's your bill of material, here's what you're ordering. Putting an agent on top of that will be the early agent wins, but it's of course an easy agent win, because this was already electronic business, which was just happening by sending files around, right, in the EDI area. So we'll have agent washing. But for the Holger agent, calling up the Jon agent and just making an example, finding a free spot in our calendars, fully delegated, right?
Oh
Not
my
so tricky
God.
yet. And would I allow that agent to do that or not? Or do I want to be in charge of that? So I
Yeah.
think there will be a lot of talk about it. It's good to have the standards on that. It's good to have the standard debate. I think there will be a standard debate. But I think the people who will have, because it just brings so much workload, whatever standards will be that AWS, Google, and Microsoft come up will have a lot of weight here. And enterprise vendors like Workday, SAP, Oracle, whatever, will code to those, right? So
So, a couple things I wanted to mention that are in my piece that's coming out. Booster had some really, really provocative and I think good quotes around why generative AI has kind of fallen short. And I think that's kind of important because I think customers are a little exhausted from the pace of the hype festival the last couple of years, and that is, a lot of these folks have used ChatGPT and found it both inspirational but also disappointing at different times, and spewing up stuff that they didn't want or need. And so a lot of the early generative AI use cases that were introduced in the enterprise felt very modest in terms of the value that they would potentially provide, right? I mean, I don't want to pick on job description generation too much, but that just isn't like really super exciting. I don't think,
if you have to write one, it is exciting.
yeah, for sure. But the point being, that might help productivity in some cases, but it's not. I don't think you could justify revolutionary rhetoric around that. And I think it was really interesting to hear Anil say, and this is a quote: Gen AI was really not that interesting, as it turns out, for the enterprise, generating content, job descriptions, and filling out forms. He's much more bullish on agents, because what they're doing with agents is they're really drilling them into very specific and deep IP pertaining to very specific enterprise roles and skills. And you can see why that's getting people's attention. So, for example, Holger, at the show, a couple of the agents that really grabbed the attention of the analysts I talked to were the ones that came via Eversort and the document intelligence acquisition of Eversort. And so, for example, the contract intelligence agent that goes through reams of your contracts that used to bury you or bury your lawyers, redlining crucial passages and points of contention, offering alternatives, offering to then, take the next step in that process and act upon that information. You can really see why, obviously it's a little bit of gymnastics that we're playing here, because all these technologies are ultimately fueled by the same LLM-based architectures and LLM planning agents, so it's not really different. But I thought it was worthwhile to kind of reset the whole thing and Workday's ambitions. And it doesn't mean they're not going to provide things like job description support and performance review support and stuff like that, but their agenda goes much deeper now.
Absolutely right. So the interesting thing, if you step even a step further away from what happened, is enterprise have always run on transactions. That's what IT was able to do, the relational database, right? If it doesn't have a transaction, it doesn't happen in the real world. Nothing will be produced, no customer visit, no order taken, nobody hired, right? You can make all these examples. Humans, on the other side, run on documents, right? And for the longest time, we couldn't even store the documents, right? That's what the Hadoop revolution, which this is why we talk data lakes and lake houses so much, has been so essential about, right? Now we see the combination of that, right? You made the Eversort example, super powerful, but that I see as an easy agent because it doesn't generate something. It gets me the insight. What is in there is a distiller, right? As important distillation is, right? As we were in Napa Valley, different pun for me to try to be funny here. But on the flip side, when it generates something, then it's interesting, right? And enterprise software, if I run payroll, it generates a gazillion paychecks for me, right? It does something. Like payroll is an agent, right? Anything in enterprise software, it does something I could manually do. Maybe on the old times I did manually, and now it's automating things which create the ROI by people who implement enterprise software, right? And that's where the cusp where we're getting to, because the LLMs couldn't do anything with documents. We see this era now changing and the architecture changing. So quickly excursion here, right? If you look at the Salesforce architecture, which by large adoption is the most adopted architecture for agents right now, they put this Uber agent in front, which directs where stuff has to go, and they can try things, but they're in charge, right? If you look at the 2025 architectures that people are putting in, there the LLM vendors have have reacted and have putting up the reasoning tool repositories. So when the LLM figures out what is going on, what's happening, the intent is I need to figure out how many people are working in my enterprise. Oh, I know this. This is this query, this API. I'm just going to call it right away in the LLM. That opens a totally different can of worms because you're going to be faster on a single LLM, but you have to seed all your tools in the multiple LLMs because nobody's saying, I'm only going to go with one. I'm going to go with multiple. So that's going to be the interesting AI.
Well, and I do feel compelled to point out. I do feel compelled to point out that a lot of the reasoning architectures are generating more hallucinations, not less. One of the interesting things that happened was a really good presentation by a partner, Auditoria AI, and Auditoria talked about this, how they've designed their architecture where humans can remain in the loop for as long as they want in certain processes that they enable, but then you can also go into full autonomous mode. I talked off stage with the Auditoria team and basically got them to concede that they don't have a deterministic solution either. No one does. There is an error rate, and you have to pay attention to that in an enterprise context. And I think that's one reason why customers are rightly concerned about getting too autonomous too soon for certain examples, such as payroll, where in a multi-agent scenario, even if you can get into the 95% range, which by the way is not easy from an accuracy standpoint, once you compound that into a bunch of agent handoffs and calls, that the mathematics of that look pretty bad actually. One interesting quote from a customer at the event said, I'm going to tell you guys, Workday and everybody else, talk less about autonomous agents and talk more about agents that help people do their jobs. I think that was a very interesting quote because this customer was not saying that they don't like Workday's AI plans at all. They weren't saying they're opposed to autonomous agents either. What they're saying was, help us adopt this technology by building trust in the technology and getting some wins out of the technology, and maybe tone down a little bit this talk of autonomous digital workers that are onboarded as employees and doing a bunch of stuff for me. Like, maybe hold off on that a little bit. So I thought that was an interesting juxtaposition of what Workday was saying versus where customers are at right now.
Give me something that works.
Yeah.
Don't give me the pie in the sky. Give me something which helps me, like you said correctly, convince my enterprise that this AI thing is working, right? But quickly, well, which actually interesting, the section that was a theme also, right? Bushy was asked, I forgot by which colleague in the crowd, right? What really makes a decision? And he said TCO. At the end of the day, it's all about who provides the better TCO for similar functionality, meaning on the flip side, that all this talking about who has more functionality, deeper functionality, better fit functionality, better customizable, configurable functionality is going to get commoditized to a certain point. It's just about the sheer mass of much you had, because we know suites always win. So that was an interesting wrinkle too, which didn't set well with many of the colleagues in the crowd. I'm a firm believer of TCO. I loved for hearing Anil saying this, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of fall in the middle of that because I understand that TCO helps you to justify. I mean, nothing works better than saying, especially if you're a CIO, like, hey, we're about to implement this new technology. By the way, it's going to save us money on top of everything else. But a lot of the best examples I see of so-called generative AI are actually a little more additive and transformative than reductionist. So, for example, I get a lot more excited about how generative AI can augment strategic decisions in the boardroom, for example, than I do about, let's use it to cut out a bunch of call center employees. Now, look, I mean, I think a lot of large multinational organizations have such great inefficiencies, and for example, they're massive like accounts payable teams, that certain forms of automation totally make sense. And I think Workday showed awesome things like that for some of their largest customers are going to result in sort of a streamline of certain departments. And if that helps you to justify further investments, then great. But I do think that talking about business results is also relevant. But I understand Anil's point, and he was quite adamant about the point too. So I think we should listen to that because he's kind of experienced with how to sell this stuff. So maybe there's something to TCO after all. Maybe it's not an outdated concept.
Something interesting, I don't know if Anil knows and watches this, right? Something he shares with fellow Silicon Valley entrepreneur Larry Ellison, who's a staunch believer and quotes the Oracle building the RDMS cheaper and earlier than IBM because of the better TCO, right? So I think the thinking is people are not stupid. it's hard for them to invest their capex into any investment. It has to pay off. Often we don't see the discipline, the rigor to look at an ROI in solutions. It's shocking to me to a certain point. We had to put on the HR system and the payroll system anyway to pay people. We don't know what the ROI is. But at the end of the day with AI, this is really a hard trade-off to say, how good is it with AI? Is it going to work for me? Is it going to make my people's lives better? Is it going to take nobody's talking about what was the thing, the mundane, what was the harsh work, whatever. There was a moniker which was flying around last year. I forgot what it is. Doesn't come to my mind right now. It doesn't matter, right? So make life more human, right, for employees, right? Take away the bread and butter work and make it more about putting the jam on the bread. Yeah.
Right, and CTO Jim Stratton quoted some TCO related benefits from some of this, and I'll just review a couple because I think they're notable. He said Western Union's using the contract agent based on the Episort technology, processing 40% more contracts, doing it 65% faster than they were, and reducing overall spend within their legal department by almost 70%. I think that's what Anil Busri was talking about when he was talking about the difference between sort of soft generative AI content generation stuff and these more hardcore. I mean, that's a hardcore business metric right there, Holger. I mean, you can't argue with if you can cite that kind of TCO. And another one was University of Miami was able to save somewhere between 50 to 80% in terms of data entry time using Workday Supplier Invoice OCR. And the one thing I will say is that in today's economy, there's not that many companies that can avoid a TCO business case at the moment. There's just not a lot of deep pockets around that can afford to just invest in speculative products. You know, that's why Meta's scaling back its virtual reality and metaverse investments right now. I mean, there's not a lot of playtime out there right now. This is like for real, you know, and the good news, I think, is that customers aren't standing still. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see like if Workday can close that gap a little bit, because I understand your point around speed, but I also think that Workday needs to offer a reassuring message to customers around how to gradually help them. And Busri acknowledged this. He said there's a need for much more education around how you get there with this technology, and I think that's really critical.
But everybody has that. Right?
So yeah. It's not a Workday specific thing. Yeah,
I'm an industry problem. There's no question about it. But just having more, if I think like a Workday seller, having more agents which I can pitch to my customer, depending where the head is definitely going to be an advantage at this time, right? Given that Workday cannot be reckless, no enterprise software vendor should be reckless. It's going to be bad for the whole industry, right? But you saw the tensions between speed, and David Sommers made that point, right? It's better to have quality than quantity. So I think there's some cultural or heated debates ahead in Pleasanton or wherever they're going to happen on Zoom. Whatever.
Yeah, and here we are in this same situation here. I'm a little more on the quality side, you're a little more on the quantity side, and you know, and let's see. And you know, every vendor has to strike that balance, right? And Workday needs to strike that balance. I think the only thing I would say is that I think that I think they can still capitalize on this if they can move, but whether they can move fast enough, you know, the markets will decide. So should we talk about Anthropic for a sec? Because
of course, please.
Because I mean, look, I mean, when I heard about this closer working relationship, I had a little bit of like pros and cons kind of thing. Like look, I mean, there's a lot of smart people at Anthropic. There's no question about it, and some of the tech they're building is really cool. But unfortunately, these big AI companies also come with a lot of religion, I find. Like that there's a religious fervor to a lot of it. And I think you have to take some of the stuff that comes out with a grain of salt. For example, not long ago, there was some stuff out of Anthropic that basically all developer jobs are going to go away in like 6 months. I'm sorry, in an enterprise context, that's bullshit. That's just absolute bullshit. There's just no other way to put it. And so it makes me think that something is wrong. Like either there's too much religion around AI, or there's not enough understanding of the difficulties of security and debugging and all of the code quality issues in the enterprise space. It's totally different if you're screwing around at home building a WordPress site. I totally get that. But and I actually think there's a lot of efficiencies around code generation, but in fact, a lot of them require additional tools and verifiers outside of the LLM. That architecture of code quality is still getting finalized. It's not there yet. And so those are the kinds of things when I hear about, I'm like, okay, partner all you want, but please take Anthropic with a grain of salt, because man, sometimes it just feels like going to a church service when I hear some of these OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google executives talking about AI. It's just like suddenly they're conscious and sentient and doing. Come on, they're pattern generation machines, and they're incredibly sophisticated, and I'm totally impressed by the power of these inventions. But stop it a little bit. Come on.
Correct. To put the antidote, right? The most pattern-centric document that's being created in enterprise for a lot of money, because developers ain't cheap, is code. Yeah. And a lot of code is written bad because humans are involved. As much as we love humans, a lot of code is not documented right. So I think if the statement is developing will not be the same, as you're moving from becoming an editor instead of being a code writer, right? So with like, how many lines of code did you make? There's a classic developer metric. How many codes of line did you generate and put in production, edited, reviewed, sanitized, is going to be the new metric. And that changes the work, changes the tools, changes the mentality, changes the mental breaks of reviewing things and so on. You might want to have somebody else generated code read by somebody else. Pair programming might be back. So I think the developer, in all the people creating it and doing documents, right, is going to be the most affected. I think developers will be most affected than journalists, right, where they can write beautiful articles.
Yeah. So for example, the news stack, that writes a lot on this type of technology. They have a really good article that just came out on the so-called vibe coding, and one of the things they point out, and just to illustrate, I'm just kind of hammering on this point as one example of developers are going away in 6 months kind of mentality. Said, I've seen intellectually curious engineers create remarkable setups connecting AI coding engines with custom MCP servers and prompting instructions to automate substantial portions of their work. I've also seen smart but myopic professionals who believe code completion circa 2022 represents state-of-the-art AI coding. So in other words, even developers that were familiar with these tools a couple years ago on the code generation side with AI are already out of date and behind. This is a process. And look, I mean, code generation is going to be greatly facilitated by AI. There's no question about it. I'm just saying, if you're going to get a bunch of inside views and sophisticated tech from Anthropic, maybe also seek out a little bit more of a critical view from somewhere else. And maybe it's you and I don't know, but I just hope that there's a little bit of a counterbalance there. But ultimately, I'm going to say that I think if they approach it judiciously, it's going to be winning. Although honestly, I think Anthropic's going to learn more from Workday than Workday from Anthropic. Sorry, but
yes, certainly. Yeah. Workday. Okay.
A strong statement. A strong statement.
I tried to put the link to the news stack on here in the chat, but I failed, so that's why I was a little distracted. Apologies for that, but great source, great people over there. Check them out. What else do we have left? We have about 5 minutes.
That was pretty much what I brought. Did we miss anything that was on your mind?
Yeah, no, I think we didn't miss too much there. It's going to be an interesting year at Workday from a cultural change perspective, what they're going to do in the go-to-market, opening of new locations, right? Japan was a major mention there, right? Which is also a huge PeopleSoft market, a huge custom software market. So it's going to be super reliable and extend. I expect Jay Wojciechowski is camping, who is the GM for Extend, camping for a few months in Tokyo if they're really serious. You can see if he's not in town, because Japanese companies like to extend, customize, whatever you want to say, massively on their applications, right? And it's going to be really interesting, if we're going to see more innovation coming out of Workday, how they're going to speed up on their AI direction in general. It's exciting times ahead. So
let's wrap on this note. A couple things looking ahead. So Workday DevCon is in a month. And that's going to be a really important show to kind of get a sense of what you were talking about, the power of three, how to extend AI to developers from customers and partners. So I think that's going to be a big show to watch, and I think there's going to be more news at that show than maybe you would see some years. And then of course Workday Rising is an important user event in the fall. So looking at your speed argument, if you're right that Workday needs to move faster, then surely you're going to be taking the temperature at Workday Rising and evaluating how far they've come. So what are you going to be looking for at Rising that you didn't see at this event? What will change your mind a little bit about their speed and execution?
Yeah, I expect a data lake, lake house, whatever you want to call it, announcement, as foundation. That might slow them down first because they have to re-platform things. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't want to run two separate architectures in parallel. I expect more focus to make 3x live, which means partners have to build, customers have to build. So in the 3 generic use case, I say for enterprise application platform, which Workday Extend is, integrate, check, extend, check, build, right? So around building your standalone automation that you're missing, that you're not getting from Workday, I think is going to be a huge focus on the developer side, right? And how much progress then partners are going to do, customers are doing. Customers might be monetizing via the marketplace will be the Rising benchmark. And then for Rising, ideally, maybe I'm getting it up too high, there will be an easy way to build agents, right? This was a conference where we didn't see an agent builder part yet, but maybe it's coming at the developer summit, right? But that's going to be super important that 2025 doesn't end and the Workday customer wants to build a tiny, miny, whatever agent can't build it themselves. Yeah, we'll see. That would be acceleration from my perspective. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sure we will be reuniting.
We'll see how much of my prediction comes through. Yeah. Happy to be wrong, right? Happy to be wrong, and Work delivers even more speed, right? How about the 16 agents I asked the developer, the leaders for that? They don't ship 8 agents this year, but 16 agents.
Yeah, we're in an interesting business because sometimes being wrong is the best feeling of all. You know, right. I love it when I underestimate a vendor. You know, and they show me something that I didn't expect, or they exceed my expectations. That's the best feeling.
We always like that.
And finally, I would just give a big credit to Angela Barbardo and the Analyst Relations team and everyone over there, because the reason you and I are able to give hopefully a pretty interesting video is because of the open discussions that are facilitated at this type of event. Because there was a lot of Q&A, a lot of back and forth, and that's what I personally need in order to come and then bring this out to the audience. Because if it was just a bunch of PowerPoints, you and I couldn't have this discussion. So nice job, Workday, on that. And here we are with something to talk about.
Same day slides for anybody in AR to hear that, right? That's the benchmark, right? End of the day, slides of the day, right? So
you got your slides at the end of the day. That's a good feeling.
Yeah, and I tried to put the comment up there for the recording. We might have gone live for me trying to put in Twitter because I see 22 people watching. So apologies for us watching that it went impromptu. We'll broadcast this, check Jon's and my channels. And Jon's Twitter handle is, by the way, above his head. So it's also there, right? It's
exactly.
Blue,
Jon,
in Twitter blue, it's over you. Flying over you. On that note, thanks, Jon. It's always a pleasure. You see so different things than I see. I hope we complement each other. People seem to like what we're doing here, and this will hopefully not be the last time we do this.
No, I suspect we'll be back again soon because we are in the height of the silly season. So see you soon, Holger.
See you soon. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching. Let us know what we missed.
Yeah, it's weird. I didn't